I want to take a look at a current event or something that happened about a month ago. I'm still in the news a lot. And it deals with the Middle East. And kind of the title of this lesson had three possibilities. One is simply the question, why? But I decided that really isn't a good title because hopefully a title tells you something about what the lesson's about and why I really just do that. And so then I thought of, okay, why is the people in the Middle East trying to kill each other, have been trying to do that for centuries, and continue to do that, and probably will continue to do that until the end of time. I thought that may be a little bit long title. And so I decided instead, what you have on your outlines here, is simply trying to understand the Middle East and modern day Israel. And that's because when we look at this area of land, that's just a map of Israel or the Middle East today, of Egypt down there in the south, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq, Jordan's dark blue up there, and the red there, Jordan, and you look at these countries, I think Syria is the one kind of blue there, Turkey, and you look at those countries and you realize that there's a lot that goes on in this area of the world. And in relation to all these, Canaan is just a very little piece of land there. Now, I was hoping this would transfer a little bit better than what it does. But we hear terms in the news such as the Golan Heights. We hear terms such as the Gaza Strip, genocide of Jews, genocide of Palestinians. Palestinians is another phrase we hear a lot. And as you look at this here, Hamas and other type of phrases like that, we wonder what's going on here. Why is this happening in this part of the world? Why are these people trying to kill each other? And not only that, but also why some Christians seem to be so interested in this from a religious point of view. And so I want to try to kind of get the big picture of all of this here. And as I do that, October 7th, obviously, is part of the reason why this is very relevant. And that is on October 7th, a group called Hamas that was in the Gaza Strip came across into Israel and killed a bunch of people. And by a bunch, I mean a bunch, over 1,000 people. I'm not sure what the death toll is now. They took over 200 hostages, and so Israel is fighting back and bombing and invading the Gaza Strip. And again, trying to get this from a big picture. And so to do that, we want to look at this kind of three different parts of this lesson. One is look at from the land of Canaan in the Bible, Old Testament, also a little bit of New Testament, but also the history of this land from the time of Jesus onward, and then finally what people are missing, kind of the application, if you would, of the lesson. And so where we can start off here, and this again is kind of a map of that part of the world there that we want to look at, kind of understand here. This is more along the lines of the ancient world, the ancient civilization of that time period. You may notice there's Canaan, right on the edge of the Mediterranean Sea. And again, I'm amazed when you stop and look at the mileage, how big an area it is, because it really isn't that big a piece of land. And not only that, but also it doesn't have a lot of natural resources, not a lot of oil wells on it. In fact, I don't even know there is a single oil well in Canaan. And it's just, again, gets a lot of attention for a number of reasons. So we want to look at this here, first of all, in the Old Testament. And as we do that here, the promise made to Abraham, that's where it starts kind of standing out here, that God, over in Genesis 12th chapter, makes a promise to Abraham, actually three promises to him. And that is in verse 1 of Genesis 12, said, "Now the Lord has said to Abram, get out of your country, from your family, from your father's house, to a land I'll show you." Didn't even designate at the time where it's going to be at. But he said, "I'll make you a great nation. I'll bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. I'll bless those who bless you, and I will curse them who curse you, and in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed." And so we have a blessing through Abraham, so it's come to all the nations. We have a great nation, a great number of people that's going to come from him. And the third thing is we have this land that's talked about. Again, not really specified at this point, but if we go on, we have the land promise stressed a number of times. In the book of Genesis, I'm talking to Abraham. They go down verse 6, Genesis 12, say, "Abram passed through the land to the place of Shechem, as far as the terebinth tree and at Morah, and the Canaanites had been in the land. Then the Lord appeared to Abram and said, to your descendants I'll give this land. And there he built an altar to the Lord who had appeared to him. And so we have then specified the land of the Canaanites. That's the place I'm going to be in. As you go on, we find again, as talked about, as far as the land of Canaan, and that is in Genesis 3, verse 12, first part of that verse says, Abram dwelt in the land of Canaan. So here we have talked about, and again, I stressed a number of times, however, Abram never really inherited the land of Canaan himself. In fact, as we have studied in the Old Testament, that he was always a sojourner, always an outsider in this land. And so looking at that God points out to us, this is a future promise. In fact, if you go to the 15th chapter, verse 16, it says, but in the fourth generation they shall return here, for the iniquity and righteousness not yet complete. And so it's going to happen after Abraham dies, and we know, again, studying through the Bible is actually during the days of the Exodus, during the days of Moses, that they come back to the land of Canaan, or they get to the land of Canaan. I didn't put up here, but verse 18, Genesis 15 chapter is again very significant because it tells us exactly the boundaries of this land. And there in verse 18 says, on the same day the Lord made a covenant with Abram, saying, now covenant again is a contractual agreement basically, between God and Abraham, and he said, to your descendants I have given this land, for the river of Egypt to the great river, the river Euphrates. And so that outlines to us the north and southern parts of this land that God's going to give to him. As you go on, we find, of course, going through Genesis, that Abram and then Abraham, Isaac and Jacob, by the time you get to Jacob, but they're also journeys in the land of Canaan. Jacob has 12 sons, become 12 tribes of Israel, but they wound up going into Egypt. And of course, we know the story about Joseph there as he sold into slavery in Egypt. In Egypt, he interprets Pharaoh's dream about the 7 years of plenty, followed by 7 years of famine. And he is taken charge of Egypt. When the famine occurs, the land of Canaan is affected by the famine. And eventually, Jacob and all his family winds up in Egypt. Joseph's down there, and he has his family brought down there. Now, I know I'm giving you the Cliff Notes, a very abbreviated version of this, but we're trying to stay focused on the land itself. And so they go to Egypt. Now, as you look at this here, one of the things about this land, and that's significant about it, is when, and this here map just kind of shows you again kind of the area we're talking about there. Egypt being farther down, and down off the map here, they leave the land of Canaan and go to Egypt. And in the land of Egypt, they become basically slaves. And as you start off in the first part of the book of Exodus, they become a great nation. They become many in number. Let me put it like that. They become many in number, but also they are slaves here. When Genesis ends, Joseph has his people in the land of Goshen. They're watching at the Pharaoh's herds. They're actually in a good location, a good place. It seems like they were well favored by Pharaoh. By the time 400 years later, they have forgotten about Joseph. They're afraid of this number of people in their land. And so they make them slaves. And you know the story about trying to kill the male children. And God hears their prayers. And as you look at this here, God gives them Moses to bring them out of the land of Egypt. And in Exodus 3rd chapter, verse 14, is when God talks to him on Mount Sinai from the burning bush and says, I am has spoken to you, and you bring the children of Israel out of Egypt. And so we got to have that, and that brings about a number of things we're all familiar with. There wasn't a case where Moses goes to Pharaoh and says, God said, let people go, and Pharaoh says, okay. But instead, he calls the 10 plagues come upon them. They leave Egypt, and they go into the wilderness, and they're wandering around there. They refuse to go to the land of Canaan when God brings them there. And because of spies, they go into the land and come back bad report. And God says, okay, you're going to wander in the wilderness for 40 years until everybody, basically, that generation dies. And so they had that, and however, one of the key parts of this, especially in Deuteronomy, in the 20th chapter onward, and Moses is given the second law, that what he does is he stresses that God has placed conditions on them. Conditions such as, you shall not worship their gods. You shall not intermarry those people. You shall go in there and wipe out the people from the land. And if you don't do what I say to you, I'm going to take you away. You'll be taken off the land eventually. If you do want to say, I'll bless you, and you shall again have great crops and plenty of children and become a great nation. And so there's conditions placed on them. And as you look at it here, again, we have this map that kind of shows in the red line there the children of Israel. They wander in the peninsula there, Sinai Peninsula, and they go to a place called Kadesh Barnea on the edge of the land of Canaan. That's where they rebelled and said, we're not going to go in because those people are too big and too strong for us. They'll kill our women and children. And so they wound up wandering in the wilderness for 40 years. Now, what's also important here is to look at that map. Hopefully you can read this. You have a dotted line that is right on the edge of the Mediterranean Sea there on the west side. That's significant because that is a major highway. That is the way of the sea. And because of that, that is a great travel route if you're going to go up into that part of the world. And so that's a short route. Then you have another dotted line that kind of is a little bit to the east of that. And that's the way of Serbia. That is part that goes to the land of Canaan, kind of through the spine of the land, through the Jerusalem, the hills, and going out that way. And then finally you have this other highway way on the east here that's actually in Media and going up towards kind of like Iran, Iraq, and those countries there, or be Assyria, and that is the King's Highway. And so what Canaan is Canaan is a country that is located really great for travel and going somewhere else. Okay, it's not like Florida. When we lived in Florida, I used to say to people, Florida is kind of like being on the end of a cul-de-sac. The only people that go to Florida are those who are intending on going there. Nobody passes through Florida going someplace else. Well, here in land of Canaan is a place where if you want to go from north to south, you're going to go through that land most likely. So location-wise, it's an important place to start with. And as you go on here, we see that when Israel comes out of Exodus, comes out of Egypt, that Joshua talks about them taking the land. And as they take the land, we find they go in the land as inhabited people. Again, they're supposed to kill everybody in order to take the land. And I read about these campaigns, but ultimately what happens is they fail to do what God said. And a good example of that is in Joshua 9th chapter, when the Gibeonites see the children of Israel taking city after city, winning victory after victory, and they fool them, they trick them. And to make a treaty with them, it says, okay, we won't harm you. And so Joshua and the children of Israel did not drive up the Gibeonites, but not only that, but also there's a lot of the folks that didn't drive out of the land of Canaan, as they should have. And so they failed to do what God said. However, by the time you get to Joshua, the 14th chapter onward, the land is divided among the tribes of Israel. And it goes on, and I believe as you look here, so we have the land divided, and I say Judges, it basically shows us the weaknesses of Israel and their total dependence on God. And that they are persecuted, they turn to God for help. God rescues them, sends a judge to drive out to rescue them, and then they go back into sin. And this here map here, not what I was hoping to show you. But basically what it shows is the tribal lands as they divided up. What's important to note is on the east side of the Jordan River you had Reuben, Gad, half-tribe Manasseh. On the west side you have half-tribe Manasseh and the other tribes of Israel. Down south you had Judah being the main tribe down there. And all the other tribes kind of located between those. And so as you look at it, by the time you get to Solomon though, Solomon says, everything God has promised us about the land has been fulfilled. That God has kept his promise to us. And that is when they're building the temple and had dedication of the temple. That 1 Kings 4 verse 21. So Solomon reigned over all kingdoms from the river to the land of Philistines. Now to the river is significant, gives the boundaries here. To the land of Philistines. Well, the Philistines are over on the coast of the Mediterranean Sea, down the southwest part. As far as the border of Egypt, so way down south, and they tribute and serve Solomon all days of his life. So that whole area. And so 8th chapter, verse 55, he said, "Then he, Solomon, stood and blessed all the assembly of Israel with a loud voice, saying, Blessed be the Lord, who has given rest to his people Israel, according to all that he promised. There has not failed one word of all his good promise which he promised to his servant Moses. May the Lord be our God, be with us, as he was our fathers, may not leave us nor forsake us." So as far as the land promise, he's saying he's done everything he promised. We received that land. And so we need to just kind of check that off, right? And we also can check off a great nation. So those things have been checked and have been fulfilled by God. And as you look at this map here, you see here that Israel, what they actually lived in is that kind of the light area. And then the green area is not just where they lived, but also what they controlled. That's the area that David had conquered during his time. So they are controlling most of that area right there, if not all of it, during his time period. So they said, God's kept his promise that he made to us. Now as you go on, we see that Israel loses the land, though, because they broke the promise to God. They broke the covenant. They didn't do what God said to do. And so because of that, again, we see that the northern Israel, those northern 10 tribes, take from the land, 2 Kings, 17th chapter, kind of almost unceremoniously says that eventually Assyria comes in and takes their body away. And so now they're gone, and that's 722 BC. And then you go on a little bit farther, southern Israel, otherwise known as Judah, that Babylon comes in 606 AD, the first time they come in and take away the first captivity, 598, the second captivity, and finally 586, they come in there and simply level Jerusalem. Destroy its walls, destroy the temple, and basically that's the end of it, as far as the nation at that time. And so they're taking off their land. And when I say the Assyrian Empire, this map here just kind of really amazed me and surprised me in a lot of ways. When you look at the Assyrian Empire, that's the area of the world they were controlling at the time. They were a huge, massive empire. Okay, and then as you go on, this is the Babylonian Empire. They kind of seem to replace Assyria. And so they are, both pretty big empires when you look at that. And again, Canaan is just a little place on the map. And compared to all these, the land of these two empires are controlling. And so then we have the time of restoration. And that is Jesus brought back from captivity. And again, kind of Reader's Digest version of this here. Ezra comes back, 536, that Israel returns, rebuilds the temple. You read through that in Ezra, often referred to as Zerubbabel's temple. And then Nehemiah comes back in about 444 BC. You can question the date a little bit. But he comes back to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. And as you go through this here, we see they're restored back to land. However, they're never really the nation they were before that. In fact, the land of Canaan, when you look at it, is important because one is the importance of it geographically. I've already said it is a way of travel. And not only just a way of travel, but also it's between kingdoms. And that is, we have Egypt down south, you have Assyria up north, you have Babylon up north. When they want to go to war with each other, where are they going to go? They're going to go right through the Canaan. And so think of Josiah. That whenever Egypt and Assyria meeting to go to battle, and Josiah, for some strange reason, goes and meets them in the ghetto and gets killed there, the reason they're there is not because they want to pick on Israel. The reason is they want to fight each other. And so it's important because of travel and also between kingdoms. Again, another map kind of just showing the land there and the different pathways there. And I'm not sure why I put that for the second time, but anyway, as you go on then, but Daniel tells us, the Daniel 4th chapter, there's going to be 4 empires that eventually is going to rule in a different time period during this part of the world. The Babylonian Empire, Nebuchadnezzar conquers Jerusalem, and Judah takes them away captive. Jeremiah, Daniel deals with that. Medo-Persian Empire, it talks about the second empire in Daniel 4th chapter, And they're the ones that Cyrus comes in and kills, basically destroys the Babylonian Empire, and that Daniel is serving at the end of the 6th chapter. And then you have the Macedonian Empire. Again, I know I'm going through these quickly. But we also refer to that the Grecian Empire, that comes in after them. And then finally the Roman Empire. And all these. So what's significant about all of this is that during this time period, Canaan is always controlled by other empires. That when Jesus comes back out of captivity, they're not in charge of their own land anymore, for the most part. There's always these other kingdoms ruling over them. And so it's now under control of other folks. New Testament. Okay, New Testament, as you look through it, Roman rule. Okay, within 4th Empire, Roman rule from about 63 BC to 313 AD, rule as part of the world. We have, of course, Jesus' birth, talked about. Matthew and Luke stress that. And the Romans that Herod the Great, trying to kill Jesus. Persecution of Christians and Jews. That read through the book of Acts about Christians being persecuted. And then also the destruction of Jerusalem. 70 AD. And the reason they destroyed Jerusalem, Rome destroyed it because they got tired of the Jews. They got tired of the Jews rebelling against them and being so obstinate. They said, we can't rule them, we're just going to have to try to take them out. And then also Eastern Roman rule from 313 to 614 AD. If you study history much, you know that Rome really kind of fell apart. And it wasn't really conquered from outside, it just fell apart in different kingdoms, different parts of the Roman Empire. So the eastern part actually ruled this part during that time period. Now, so from that time onward, after the time of Christ, we have periods of different rule. Muslim rule, basically, Muhammad, born 570 AD, claims they have revelation of God, Muslim religion. And then we have the Dome of the Rock. It's built in Jerusalem in 691 AD. A very significant place to the Muslims, the Dome of the Rock, and it's still there. You have then another reign, and basically another Muslim reign, and that time from 1291 to 517, Jerusalem is in ruins. Just been destroyed, basically nothing there anymore. Then 517 by 1917, the Ottoman period. Again, another Muslim rule time period. And then as you go on, Canaan during this time period is divided into 4 districts. The walls of Jerusalem was rebuilt. Russian, Polish Jews in particular returned back to Canaan. Okay, during that time about 1917. And go on here, and that's a picture, by the way, of the Dome of the Rock. And that is in Jerusalem. And just notice that the nation of Israel is not touching it. They're leaving alone because they know if they do, then they'll have all the Muslims upset with them. And so they're still there, and they're in the city of Jerusalem. Well, British rule. From 1917 to 1948, the British ruled this period. And during this time period, there's a Balfour Accord Declaration. But basically, they said Palestine is the home of the Jews. We were going to recognize the home of the Jews. In 1947, after the war, after World War II, after the Holocaust, the United Nations approved the petition of Israel to separate Jewish and Arab states. In other words, it's saying that part is going to become, the Arabs going to stay there, part is going to be Israel. Okay, so sometimes we hear today about the two-state solution, that's what they're talking about. And as you look at this here is the map of 1947 of Israel. And the light part there, that's Israel. And the dark area, you have each grid, that dark area on the Mediterranean Sea and over Beersheba, Jerusalem, and on the north Lebanon, that's all Muslim rule. And so Israel is really divided into different sections where they're separating each other's land. And also, they're really not in a good position militarily. And so what happens eventually, in 1967, and this one I remember, and that is that a coalition of Arab nations decided to attack Israel. And they think, we got the upper hand, we're going to wipe them out and take over. And Israel stay turns around and conquers Jerusalem They go and take the Golan Heights, they take Sinai, the Sinai Peninsula from Egypt, and the West Bank. And so by the end of this, where the left is Jerusalem or Israel before the war, on the right here you see now they have much more control of their land. And you still have the Gaza Strip, you still have the West Bank, and you still have Golan Heights there, but Israel has expanded their territory tremendously here during that time period. And as you go on, in 1978, we have the Camp David Accord, where Jimmy Carter gets the leader of Egypt together, the leader of Israel together, and they come to an agreement. And basically, and Egypt may knows today, is not fighting Israel. And the agreement basically is, we'll have peace with you, just give us back our land. Give us back the peninsula that we used to own. Israel says, okay. In 1999, Gaza is actually given kind of self-rule about Israel. And as they kind of walled them in and said, okay, you live there, we'll leave you alone, just don't do anything bad. In 2005, Israel invades Gaza because they did something bad. That they started attacking Israel across the border and shooting Israelites. So Israel invaded Gaza to try to wipe out the terrorists. And then after that, there was a period of peace, basically. And then October 7th, 2023, Hamas crossed the border and kills all the people we talked about to start this lesson. The thing about Hamas, that you read about those, just got a little bit of explanation about those folks, is that we often hear that they are a terrorist organization and Hezbollah terrorist organizations. But Hamas actually is an organization that is not welcomed by almost any other Arab country either. They are against the monarchies. They're against the rulers of Saudi Arabia, of Egypt, of Jordan, and Syria. About the only country that actually likes Hamas is Iran. And the reason because Hamas wants the Sunnis to rule everything, their particular brand of Muslims. And Hamas is considered so bad that Egypt has actually not allowed refugees across their border from Gaza because they're afraid that Hamas come over with them. And so that's why they're not allowing any refugees from Gaza to go down to Egypt today. And same thing about the other countries. And so it really is a group that nobody wants anything to do with because it's called so radical. And when you hear a phrase like, from the river to the sea, we shall be free, what they mean is, from the Jordan River over to the sea, they want Israel exterminated. They want all the Jews killed and basically rule that area. And again, when we talk about terrorists and how bad they can be, I mean, this is a group of people that have on social media bragged about how many Israelites they killed, how many they have tortured, how many they raped, how many they have babies they killed. They are a bad group of people. Okay, so let's kind of bring this to a close here about points of importance then. And one is, Jews and Muslims both claim land on religious grounds. The Jews say, this is our homeland, this is what God promised us, all the way back to Abraham. This is our land. The Muslim says, Muhammad is God's holy prophet, and we have the Dome of the Rock here. This is our land. We have lived here for all these centuries, from like 606 or whatever year it was there, all the way to present. This has been our homeland. When the United Nations said Israel could have it, they're taking away our land from us. And so, again, we have to just keep in mind, God's land promise was fulfilled. Once he did that and took them off the land, that shows he had fulfilled his promise to them. And so, what both are doing, and in particular the Jews, they ignore the very seed promise. The main promise God made to Abraham wasn't really the land promise, it was through his seed all nations of the earth should be blessed. So they missed that point there. The second thing is, many today side with Israel, still think of them as God's holy nation. And how many times do you hear on television, this is God's holy nation, this is God's holy land. Well, look at that there, and do the premillennialism. That they believe Jesus will come back and rule on the throne of David in Jerusalem, and whoever is aligned with Israel will be blessed by God. And what you keep in mind is God's holy nation today are Christians, not the Israelites of old. In 1 Peter 2 verse 9, but you are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, and his own special people, that you may proclaim and praise him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light, who once were not a people, but are now the people of God, had not obtained mercy, but now have obtained mercy. And so that's holy nation. Again, we have to think about, okay, who's the you? Well, you are a holy nation. You are the ones God's blessed. Well, again, Peter identifies for us who the you is in 1 Peter 1 verse 1. Peter, an apostle of Jesus Christ, to the pilgrims of the dispersion of Pontus, Galatia, Cappadocia, Asia, Bithynia, elected according to the foreknowledge of God the Father, in sanctification of the Spirit, for obedience and sprinkling the blood of Jesus Christ. Grace to you and peace be multiplied. Blessed be the God, Father, Lord Jesus Christ, that according to his abundant mercy, has begotten us again to live in him through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead. That's who the you is. That's who the holy nation is today, is Christians. And so our salvation is not based on land, it is based on, again, the blood of Christ. In fact, ironically, Jesus said he didn't come to set the earthly kingdom. When it's asked a question over in John 18, verse 36, are you a king? He said, my kingdom is not of this world. And on that, also the Bible points out that he's not going to ever step foot on earth again. The last passage reading to you is 1 Thessalonians 4, verse 15. For this we say to you by the word of the Lord, that we who are alive remain till the coming of the Lord, will by no means precede those who are asleep. For the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a shout, the voice of archangel, with the trumpet of God, and dead in Christ rise first. Then we who are alive remain shall be caught together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. And us who shall always be of the Lord, therefore come from one another with these words. He's going to be in the air. He's not come back here. And so it's, again, a false premise, a false idea that somehow that there's going to be an earthly kingdom again. It's always through the blood of Christ, our salvation, that God intends for us to be saved. And so that kind of, hopefully, kind of clears up some things as far as what's going on over there and why it's going on. And here's some of these groups that are talking about extermination and why they're fighting. I appreciate your kind attention. And maybe when you get to hear your neighbors talking and somebody says something about this, or you say, have you thought about this passage? Do you understand what we're talking about, what's happening over there? And we give them better explanation. We have a song selected now. What song is it, Gary, again?
326.
326, Trust and Obey. So tonight, if anybody needs to obey the gospel, anything we do for you, why don't you let us know as we stand, as we sing.
When we walk with the Lord.